Harvey's Hot Takes with Bryan Hayes. The Leafs are looking good in the Atlantic Division, and one of the big reasons why is John Tavares. What a season he is having. 13 goals and 7 assists in the month of March alone. And we talked with our friend Pierre LeBrun last week, Brian, and he said, a potential contract extension for Tavares is looking more expensive than it would have in September, and he cited the fact that the NHL has already said the cap's going up the next 3 years, and agents know this. And he used the Jake Chychrun contract extension as evidence of that. That was a lot more than I think a lot of people thought Chychrun was going to get. And he ties it all into the cap going up. So you might think Tavares is going to cash in, but you believe the Leafs still have all the leverage. Brian, tell us why.
Yeah, I do. I think this is going to be pretty simple when it comes to a Maple Leaf perspective and John Tavares. If and when it gets to a point where they actually try to knock out details on a new contract, do you want to play in Toronto or do you want to make the most money? Because I don't believe those are mutually exclusive. I think you can look at the Steven Stamkos scenario, the Jonathan Marchessault scenario. Those are two examples from last year. Legacy players in Tampa and Vegas, two guys that won a lot in Tampa and Vegas, and Tampa and Vegas both said, this is what we can give you. If you want to stay here, if you want to stay where you're comfortable, if you want to stay where you're a legend, where you're a guy that can win, you're a guy that's going to lead this team into the future, you have to do it based on our terms. And I think the Maple Leafs are in a very similar situation here because John Tavares has made it very clear he wants to stick around. And obviously he's going to get paid something if that ends up happening here in Toronto. But there's also a couple of other leverage plays that I think fall in line with the Maple Leafs having the ball on their side of the court. And that is they still got to play in the playoffs. John Tavares has had a phenomenal season. You just detailed the stats he's had just in this month alone. The guy has been the definition of a consistent professional since the day he walked into the league. And what I appreciate about what he's doing this year is this isn't just some contract platform performance. This is consistent with what he's done since he arrived in Toronto and, again, since he arrived in the league when he got drafted by the Islanders first overall back in the day. Every single year he scores. He puts up goals. He puts up points. He stays healthy. He's a great professional. He's a great guy in the room. He says a lot. He's great with the media in terms of interactions, in terms of always being available and willing to speak. Everything about John Tavares just seeps and oozes professionalism. So this isn't some guy who generally scores 15 goals a year that all of a sudden is going to score 35 and demand you pay him like a 35-goal scorer. He is exactly what he's been since day one in Toronto. So if you're the Maple Leafs, in my opinion, Jay, you got to get through the playoffs first before you even make a determination on what you want to do in the future. Because if they win, they go on a run, maybe they make it to a cup final, maybe they finally win a Stanley Cup, everyone can breathe easy, everyone can have a different viewpoint on the core four. Because then I think your reaction is, okay, this was always going to work, and it finally did because they have the right pieces around them, bringing in Chris Hanna, bringing in Ekman Larsson, having the right goaltenders, having the right guy behind the bench. But if they lose again in the first round, then it doesn't matter how great John Tavares was during the regular season. It doesn't matter what he did over the course of 7 regular seasons as a Maple Leaf. The fact of the matter is, if they lose in the first round again, John Tavares will have been here for 7 years, and he's helped them win 1 round. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care how great he is during the regular season. I think the Leafs would have to make an adjustment to the way they build their team, and that might start with John Tavares. So again, that's where the Leafs are standing before they even get to a conversation about his future. Also, the Mitch Marner conversation hangs over all this, and Tavares is well aware of it. Until they figure out what they're doing with Mitch, what they're going to pay him, they're not even going to get to the starting line when it comes to Tavares. So he's had a great, great year. But it's simple as far as I'm concerned. The Maple Leafs need to take a page out of the Tampa Bay Lightning book, the Vegas Golden Knights book. If you want to be here, it's not about money. It's about being here. And I think that's long overdue when it comes to their best players. And again, I credit John. He's had an unbelievable season. But I don't think it's as simple as 40 goals, 80 points. You got to pay him a lot of money with a lot of term. I don't think it was ever going to be the case. And I think it's even more complicated because he's in his mid-30s. He's not a young guy.
Marty Biron isn't a young guy either, but he just looks like a young guy because he never ages. And he pretty much ended the Vancouver Canucks playoff hopes on this show yesterday, Brian, after their loss to the Winnipeg Jets. Vancouver, by the way, 6 points out of that final wild card spot with 8 games left. If I had told you in September, Bryan Hayes, that the Vancouver Canucks could potentially finish last out of all 7 Canadian teams, what would you have said?
I would have said that's impossible. I think that would have been my answer. That is impossible that they finish behind Calgary, behind Montreal, behind Ottawa. And it is truly amazing that we're at this position where that is becoming a clear-cut reality. That maybe the Habs don't finish with as many points or right around the same amount of points, but Montreal might make the playoffs. And Calgary is right there with them in terms of chasing that point number. It has been an absolute debacle in Vancouver. It has been the worst possible nightmare, worst possible soap opera you could imagine for a Canuck fan base that finally had a reason to celebrate last year. And prior to last year, it had been ugly in Vancouver for quite some time, with turnover in management, turnover behind the bench, a lot of uncertainty in terms of what they were going to do with their cap situation, how they were going to build out their farm system. There were a lot of different issues that they had been dealing with. All of them were smoothed over last year. Everything broke their way. And I think it was realistic to expect them to come back to earth a little bit, but they have crashed right through the core of the planet here. I mean, this is as bad as it could possibly get, Jay, where now there's so much uncertainty in the air. What's going to happen with Rick Tocchet? We don't even know who their coach is going to be next year. We don't know if Rick Tocchet even would want to stay. And if he does, what is the pitch to Rick Tocchet? How much are you going to have to pay Rick Tocchet? Quinn Hughes is up in a couple of years. What does his future look like? Do you keep Elias Pettersson beyond July 1st when his no trade and his no movement kick in? JT Miller's already gone. Like, they don't score. They have a lot of uncertainty when it comes to injuries. What is Thatcher Demko in the future? Who's their head coach? I mean, I could go on and on and on. It's not just simply that they've had a bad season point-wise, that they're going to miss the playoffs. It's that there is so much uncertainty about their future. There's this dark cloud that I'm concerned, if I'm a Canucks fan, this will continue into the offseason and possibly into next year and years beyond. So if you had have told me this in September, I'd say it's impossible. Now that I'm through it, I still have a really difficult time believing that we're actually here with the Canucks. But my biggest concern is that I'm not convinced it's an easy fix. I'm not convinced they just get back on the saddle and start riding next year. They have some really, really heavy lifting moves to make out there, tough decisions to make. There may be more and more turnover coming. And again, Quinn Hughes up in 2 years, man. It's a scary, scary scene and a couple of scary thoughts, I'm sure, percolating in the minds of Canucks fans in terms of what this could look like a year or two from now.
Yeah, but Canucks Twitter is very rational, so I'm sure they'll handle it fine. Brian, you predicted the Max Scherzer situation that the Blue Jays are dealing with right now. You set the over-under on his starts at 15. However, I'm not sure that even you have predicted that he would last 3 innings before being injured on Saturday. He's on the injured list. If you're the Blue Jays at this point, Bryan Hayes, do you have to proceed as if you can't rely on Max Scherzer at all this season?
Yes, I think you have to. I think at this point you have to be basically planning for him not to be a Blue Jay anymore, and anything he gives you in the future is simply a bonus. And I wish I weren't right on that prediction that he may not get to 15 starts, 20, 25 starts, but I can't say I'm surprised, and I don't think anybody is, and I don't think anybody should be. Max Scherzer's not a young guy. He's had a lot of injuries the last couple of years. Him talking about his thumb, that was basically day 1 of spring training. That was 5-6 weeks ago, Jay. Like, this didn't creep up on them on Saturday right before his first start. This has been hovering around Scherzer. Late into the spring, there was uncertainty of whether or not he would even break camp and make his way up to Toronto and make that first start. Evidently, it didn't go well. Evidently, he had warned John Schneider and Pete Walker, the pitching coach, prior to the game, hey, something's up here. I'm not feeling it. And his post-game press conference on Saturday was very unsettling in terms of a pitcher who knows his body and knows he's not right. It just doesn't have faith in it, is worried about that thumb injury, and is going to go find out what's going on. And he will not pitch again until he knows he has 100% confidence in it. That's basically what he said. So hopefully he returns in 3 or 4 weeks. But I think everything's on the table, including the idea that he's not going to be available to them. And that's where it's going to expose what the Blue Jays really did over the offseason and how prepared they are to actually grind their way towards 87, 88, 89 wins and get into the playoffs, because that's what it's going to be. That's what it was going to be with a healthy Scherzer. I think if he gave you 30 starts, it was going to be a grind to be a playoff team this year for the Jays. A lot of things had to break their way. If he's going to give you 3 innings everything is on the table in terms of the fact that they just don't have depth within in this organization. They never have. Like throughout the Shapiro and Atkins era, they've just never had depth in terms of a 6th, 7th, 8th starter, someone that's just bubbling over in AA, AAA, waiting to pounce, waiting to come up and help this team. They don't have it. And they obviously don't have it today in terms of what they're going to do with Scherzer just in the immediate future. Forget a month or 2 or 3 months down the road. Their bullpen, they're already designating for assignment players that just broke camp with them 4 days ago. It's happening quickly. Yes, it's a marathon, but this kind of stuff can really pop up quick. And if it burns you early, it's going to burn you late. And I think the Blue Jays are well aware of that. They have to be panicking to a certain extent. They're not going to say that or show that publicly. But for me, any starts you get out of Scherzer now the rest of the way is a bonus. And if they're going to go forward with what they currently have, I don't see how it's going to work. So Ross Atkins, man, he's already got to get to work. This is a disastrous start for the rotation. Again, it will leak into the bullpen. And it's too bad because the Scherzer signing was a cool one. I think I could speak for a lot of Blue Jay fans. A lot of people looking forward to seeing him pitch. I'm not convinced it's going to happen.
You said, Bryan said it, he wishes he wasn't right, but that's the problem. He almost always is. That's why he's the host of Harvey's Hot Takes.
Hot Takes is presented by Harvey's. Customize your burger and get it delivered from our app to your door. Harvey's, it's a beautiful thing.